Hi guys, I am Nu-Trix and welcome to another video of Nu-Trix the Synth Guy. Now today I'm answering directly to Miles. Miles is a subscriber of my YouTube channel and he wrote to me a couple of, months, days go by right now, and I don't know when we are actually after all this confinement and staying at home for so long. So I'm guessing he wrote to me about a month ago or two, I'm not sure. And his question was about syncing, how to sync different devices he had. So what I'll do an online consultation. It's not live with him, but I will take whatever he gave me and I will suggest 3 different options for him to set up his gear. The setup is not so hard. It's more about how you set up every devices. So there's different ways to use it. And you'll see these are, hardware that we see all the time. And I'm not sure that my solution will be the best for him because we all have different ways of doing our things. We have different ways of, working, workflows, inspiration, settings, and steps in the process of making music. Do we want these steps to be always the same? Do we want to be flexible? There's a lot of questions that I don't have any answers because we're not doing a live session together. But I will lay out 3 different ways to approach his setting up for his hardware. This is a Dawless system, so we're clear on that. I don't even know what style of music Miles is doing, and that's not important because workflow is different than the style of music. It's just steps in which you're going to work. By the way, this is something I will offer anybody to have in-person consultation for a fee. I'm starting this now. If you like this, if you're in need of somebody helping you analyzing your setup or the setup you want to create, or you have hardware you don't know how to program it, or you don't know how to make it work with something else, or you have hardware you want to make it work with, Ableton Live, whatever it is, I'm offering now one-on-one session. So if somebody wants to troubleshoot their system, somebody wants to have help into buying the next gear that fits with the rest of their gear, or with whatever you have, make it work the best possible way, or even maybe just I could even help you open up your system and say, well, with what you have, there's stuff you're not doing that you could be doing. So I can do that for you if you're interested. So if that is something you want, one-on-one sessions, if that's something you need and you want, well, follow the link to the Nu-Trix.com website. You have the link here, and you go there and you'll see all the information about setting up a one-on-one meeting with me. I'll be more than happy to help. That's part of what I do, and that's what I've been doing for 25 years now. And we'll talk about that soon because I will talk more about it because I'm setting up stuff so that my YouTube and webpage is becoming something else this year. Let's go back to Miles' stations. So his system is basically made of 3 devices. There's more, but there's 3 devices we want to talk today. He has a Yamaha DTX12 drum machine. So it's a it's a pad drum machine. People can play on it, and you can even attach extra pad to it. It's actually a sampler or a sampler playback. It has its own pattern that you can create in it. Okay, so you can create patterns. You have, if I'm not mistaken, because what I'm doing right now, I'm getting all this information only from the manuals. I'm just going through the manuals to try to figure out how it works. And you'll see that you can do a lot when you read the manual. And the DTX12, if I'm not mistaken, can play 12 sounds at the same time. And so there's 12 sequence for each of these 12 sounds. And what you can do on this, you can actually use the sequence to trigger the internal sound or trigger external sound. So keep in mind that any type of device, like a keyboard, a drum machine, a beatbox like this one, a pad that you play, all of these devices actually are 2 machines inside the same box. You have the controller, the keys, the pads, you have the brain, the sound generating engine that is also a separate box. So it means that in the DTX12, you can use the pad to actually trigger the sound of something else, like in this case is other device, which is an Electribe 2 sampler, the pinkish one. So it means that he could use this Yamaha drum to trigger his own internal sound real time, or with patterns and play on top of the patterns, or in real time play the sound from another device, the Electribe. So it's there's like an option there for that. The Electribe, we know about this. It's a sampler. It has 16 parts. There's patterns also. You can have sequence patterns. And what's cool about that one is you have motion control, motion record. So if you change the value of I don't know, attack, decay, whatever it is, part of the sound, it will record in the sequence. So that's a cool thing. Why? I would say we'll talk about it later, but that's one of the reasons why the internal sequencer in the Electribe is a really great match with its own internal sound generator, which is a sampler playback. So the Electribe is the second one. And the third one is a keyboard. It's the Korg Monolog. Now, the Monolog is a monophonic synthesizer. It has its own little sequencer in it. It's a great little synth. It's analog. It's just cool. Again, the Monolog is two devices into one box. What I mean by that is the controller, the keys, and the pitch bend and the wheel is a MIDI generator that sends MIDI messages. It's not a sound module. There's in the device a separate device that is a sound module, the synthesizer, the brain that makes the noises that we hear. And these two, when you play the keys, are linked together, but you can unlink them. And one of the key points I will talk today, and Miles, that could be really important for you and the way you're going to set up your kit and decide how you want to work with it, is that when you disconnect the key of the Monolog from its internal sound, when you play on it, you will not trigger the sound that is there, but it will send MIDI into the output. And that might be the key to a different way for you working, because it means that when you have the MIDI out, you could control the sound of, if it comes back, its own internal sound, of course, the synthesizer, but also it could trigger sounds of the Electribe sampler, or it could trigger sound off the DTX12 from Yamaha. So it becomes your main controller that sends MIDI everywhere. Okay? Now, specifically, the question he has goes like this. I want to hook up all using a daisy chain and have all the onboard sequencer or patterns work together. So one thing that is important is if you daisy chain this with MIDI, it means that, let's say, in this case, he says in this way, he wants to use the DTX because it's a drum machine to be the master MIDI controller. In this case, I think the three of them are a good choice to be the master controller. It doesn't really matter. The only difference is you're going to press play on one of the three and the three will play together. One thing that is important is that when I looked at the manual of the three devices, three of them, they have patterns or sequencers, which is basically patterns. None of them seems to have the concept of a song, meaning you can actually program, you're going to play pattern number 2 for 3 times or 4 times, and then play pattern number 3 for 8 times, and then play pattern number 1 for 2 times, and then, program a whole song with selecting the patterns, how much they play and when they play, and the sequence of these patterns. For when I'm looking at the manuals, there's none of these three. The Electribe sampler, the Korg Monolog, which is normal. A synthesizer usually doesn't have a sequencer. It has a sequencer, yes, but it's just one pattern at a time, and there's no song mode. Same thing for the drum machine for the DTX12. So, unless I'm mistaken, it means that if you want to use these, none of them is a better controller because none of them has a song in it. All of them have patterns. But I'll go with what he says, the DTX being the master controller. And I think he's right because the DTX, what is cool about it is that it has the options of sending program change. So you could actually change patterns and send program change to the other devices so they also change patterns. You would have to go deeper into the MIDI programming, but this could be possible. We should have to actually test this, because I don't have them. I can't test it, but that would be one way I would actually look into it. So go back to daisy chaining. Daisy chaining means to take the first device, which is the drum machine, take the MIDI out, send into, let's say, Electribe. The Electribe, inside it, you have to go and program and say, well, I want to merge the MIDI in to the MIDI out, and becomes a through. So we'll send the same information coming in to the next one. And the next one, you actually take the MIDI in and you receive. And this one, the first, the drum machine, you say it's master for MIDI sync. And the two others, you go inside it and say, well, MIDI sync, we're going to be slave. You're going to receive the MIDI sync. It's going to follow the tempo, the start, the stop, the continue from the first device. That's it. What could happen? And when you do this short daisy chain, it should work correctly, but you might have a latency between the first and the third one. Okay? First and second is okay, first and third should be okay, but you might have a latency. When you get after the third one, usually the latency is it's not too big, but you hear that your last one is late. Okay? So if this happened with this setup, you might want to change stuff around. Say, well, I'll put the first one, the DTX again, second one will be the monologue, third one will be the Electribe. Or the Electribe, the master, play around until you find that you have the setup where you have the least amount of latency when you press play, and you listen, is the bass late compared to the kick drum? Because this is not something you want in music, because you want to be controlling the latency. If there's a latency, it's because you were laid back in the way you're playing, not because your system is playing slowly or is late in the playback. So that's the first thing. But there's another reason why you would not want to do the daisy chain. First of all, I would suggest to have the maximum capacity in this setup, to have what a central box that would be a true box, and then you have one in and let's say 4 through. I have one of these here somewhere. It's in the back of my devices there. And what you do with that is that it means that, let's say you decide that the keyboard is the master controller, or the drum machine, or something else. You hook it up the way you want. Or you have a box like a MIDI timepiece that has 4 ins and 4 outs. You plug everything in there. What's interesting about this is that you can say at any time that the controller of the keyboard can play the internal sound or can play the sound from the Electribe. At any moment you can say that the drum I'm playing on the Yamaha drum pads are actually internal sound or sounds from the Electribe, because you would be able to reassign MIDI to stuff like that. And that's where it becomes more complicated, because you're setting, if you just want to do a daisy chain, it should work, but if you've got some type of latency, play around with the order. The second question you have is, how do I make it into actual songs? With the rest and variation of the song and all that. Well, the problem you have with this is that none of them have a song mode. So I would suggest that all of them, you create multiple versions of your tracks or your song. Let's say I know that I have, let's say, pattern number 1 is empty. So if you play pattern number 1, it will play an empty pattern. This instrument is not playing. Pattern number 2 is, let's say the drum starts to play, it's the intro. And you want this to play with the monologue. So pattern number 2 on monologue, so you create the bass line, whatever. And then these two play together. And then manually, when you get to, the evolution of the songs start to be something else, then you go into your Electribe and you load pattern number 2 or 3 or 65, whatever it is, and then you start that, it plays along with the other one. So it means that manually you have to go between each devices and say, load this one, load that one, and then you switch between them. It all depends on how you play live with these devices. You could program change coming off your DTX12. So when you change a program, a pattern there, it would send the message to the two others so they change also pattern. I think it's possible. You would have to test it out. You would have to look at how to program it and the two others to set it up so they really can change patterns. But if I'm not mistaken from the MIDI information, it is something you can program. But then it means also that you would have to say, well, when I change to pattern number 2 here, I know it's going to be pattern number 3 here and 4 over there, or 2 and 2, whatever it is. I'm going to call up another internal patterns in these two other devices. So this is something you could look into, but it's not going to be easy. Okay, it's not like having a song that goes by itself. So you would have, some people actually will load, let's say, the Electribe, and will have all the tracks playing, and basically they have the whole song, and then they just mute parts. And then they say, well, you know, depending on the parts I'm in, I'm just going to unmute parts, and that's the one I'm going to hear. Or, in your case, on your picture, I can see you've got a little mixer. You've got the Zoom R8. So you could also send all your information to the Zoom and just play around and say, I'm going to bring this one up. I don't want the bass anymore. Bring it down. So you're not changing the sequence on it. You're just not listening to it anymore. So there's different ways to actually look into how you can do it. But basically, by default, I would say with these devices, because they know song mode, you would have to go into each of them and in real time say, I'm going to switch memory, switch sequence, play around with this, switch patterns, you know, or have one telling to the others, switch the pattern number, whatever, and then they switch all together at the same time. So that would be one way to look into that. The next step is the question about MIDI channels, because you're asking, if you daisy chain everything like that, will everybody be on the same channel? Will everybody be in different channels? That, I'm not sure it works, because the DTX12, when I look into the manual, it's not clear if all the sounds are on the same channel or they are all on different channels. And for what I understand, you can put all of the pads on different channels. So you could put all of them on channel 1 and say channel 1 are the sounds coming off the DTX, and channel 2 is the monologue, and channel 3 to 16 is dedicated to Electribe. So, because you need to understand that this setup you have, if you daisy chain or if you go through a true box or a MIDI timepiece, stuff like that, you basically will share the same 16 channel across all your devices. So if you want to use 16 different sounds and keep one channel for the drum from the DTX, one channel from the MIDI monologue, you will still have 14 channel dedicated to the Electribe. So that would be kind of how you do it. So then you would have to go into the Electribe and say channel 1 and 2, for example, I don't use them, you know, because these will be used by other devices. But the DTX, all the pads can send to different channels. So you can say, I'm playing pad 1 to channel 1, pad 2 to channel 2, pad 3 to channel 3, and then have 12 sequence. But keep in mind that the 12 sequence playing off the DTX will be percussive sequence. So if you have that sequence triggering the monologue, well, it's going to be the sequence of a snare. That's it. So there's no variation in note. It's just going to be tack, 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 tack. So you're going to be bum, 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 always the same note. So it's not super useful in the case of having a drum sequencer triggering a synthesizer, but it would be interesting. You could use that to control the Electribe. But again, the Electribe has a very good internal sequencer with motion control and all these things you can do with it. So it's not super important in your case. Again, I don't know how you're looking at making music, but what could be cool is that you take the output of the DTX, okay? You have internal sound playing, and you select some of the pads themselves, you can put the local control off. Local control off is basically you say to the controller, the pads, do not play the internal sound. Sends only the information through the MIDI out. And then when you say these pads play on channel 1, well, the MIDI goes back, let's say it goes into the through box goes into your monologue, your electribe, and your drum machine. So when you play on channel 1, it's a drum machine. Change to channel 2, you play, it's the monologue. Change to channel 3, it's the channel 3 from the electribe. So you would be able to select which one you want to hear. Same thing if you do this, but for the monologue. If you go into the monologue and say internal, you put it in local off. When you play on it, it doesn't play the internal sound. When you select channel 1, well, it goes into the MIDI channel cable, goes back into the internal sound after it went through the box, the MIDI through, or the MIDI timepiece, or a MIDI switcher if you want, a MIDI patch bay if you want to call it like that. When it goes into that, it comes back, then you're controlling this one. But if it goes back into the electribe, then you can actually play the electribe from your keys, okay, without disconnecting anything. But if you assign this to the drum, then you can play the drum sounds. So this is probably the most versatile setup, where you go through a central box that has 4 in and 4 out, and then you plug your 4 in and then you plug your 4 out. And I say 4 because if I'm not mistaken, the R8 from Zune might have a MIDI in and MIDI out. If it does, you could also maybe control some of the real-time mixing features of it. But let's not go into that for now. So this setup would mean that if you go on your monologue and you change channel, you will basically change the instrument you're controlling. And if you go into the DTX12 and you change the channel, you will also change which sound you're playing when you're playing on it. So you look at it like you don't have 3 devices anymore, you've got 6 devices. You know, you have a pad you can play, you have an internal sound that can actually respond to any other controller. Same thing, you've got a keyboard that can play any other sound. You've got a sound module that can receive, control, and play the sound you want. And you have the same thing with the electribe. So that would be kind of the best way to open up and be able to change the way you work depending on what you want to do. Because you might want to say, well, the electribe has great internal sound also. I can have a lead, I can have a pad, depending on the sound you load in, I can play this. So then you would have the monologue and this to do all your sounds, and then if you want the drum, well, you might want to actually play live the performance that you have in the and playing from the electribe from the DTX. So it's a very capable system. The only drawback in a way, but again it depends on your workflow, is that you don't have any of them that has a song. So if you want to create a structure of intro, verse, and build up a song and kind of program most of it, and then you just sit down and listen to, you have a problem here. You could maybe do it with a sequencer, but then you're moving a little bit away from the Dawless system at that point. So it's really playing with 3 sequencers at the same time and playing with the volume of each and the presence of each, and that's more like what this setup's going to be like. So that's it. I hope it gave you ideas of how to look at your system to make it more adaptable to your needs. I hope also that others had a glimpse of how you can look at your gear. And all my suggestions, I basically based it on going to the manual. I downloaded the manual, I look at the specs, I look at how you do things, I read the utility section, I looked at the MIDI implementation chart, because that's what I do. I know these things. I teach that for many years, so I know how to read these information, and it's easy. After you know that, you know exactly the limit of your device. This one can be a master, this one can be a slave, this one can send MIDI, this one can change channels, this one cannot, and then you kind of build on that. So that's it. If you have any question, put them in the comments. If you have any comments, same place. If you like it, thumb up. And again, if you're interested in having a one-on-one consultation, if you have a question you want me to answer, the information will be on my Nu-Trix.com website, and the information's there. you know how it works, and if you want to book something, you go there and you book it. That's it. Have a good